All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to where I've been and the future of the channel. I'm going to peel the band-aid off real quick. Where I've been, I've just been sick. Um, and it's not that which must but not be named. It's Thank you. It's entirely complications due to my multiple anxiety disorders, and my conversion disorder has just made my life a living nightmare for a few months now. As far as the future of the channel, it's not changing. I've just been sick. It's not that I'm taking a step away or taking time for my mental health. I've just been too sick to record videos. It's all it is. So if anyone's worried about where the channel is going or anything like that, it's still going to be still going to get going. I'm going to go into more details in a second here, but I wanted anyone that is worried to know channel's not going anywhere. I'm not taking a break. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sick. It's all it is. And the thing that has been causing me the most trouble and has been aggravating everything, theoretically, well, not theoretically, it'll be over by the end of the month. And again, I'll get into more information if you want that. You can watch the rest of the video. But overall, by July, theoretically, which will be 10 years, I'll be starting my 11th year on YouTube in July. Things should start getting back to normal, where I'm putting up multiple uploads a week and things like that, and getting back to discovering new dragons and designing new dragons. I love doing that stuff. I'm spending 20 hours a day in bed right now because of how much pain I'm in. So yes, that's the very brief Cliff's Notes. If all you want to know is what the hell's going on, you do not need to watch the rest of this video. The rest of it is just going to be me explaining in a little more detail exactly what's been going on and my plan to get back on track. So, for those of you that may or may not be aware, I am 100% permanently and totally disabled. And the reason I use that particular phraseology is that is what the federal government has classified me as. My specific disabilities are I have, and I have to see if I can remember all these because I don't have them written down anymore. I used to write all this stuff down because it was easier for me. But major depressive disorder, chronic, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, panic disorder with agoraphobia, and post-traumatic stress disorder, both simple and complex, or traditional and complex, and then a thing called conversion disorder, which we'll talk about in just a second. So that kind of cocktail of bad mental health stuff means that there are certain situations where to a normal person it would not be an enjoyable experience to go through, but for me my body literally starts ripping itself apart. All the stuff I just talked about, most people have probably heard of, like major depressive disorder, just depression in general. Major depressive disorder is the clinical diagnosis of clinical depression, and chronic just means that it goes on for a long time. If you have a chronic illness, it means it just doesn't stop effectively. Generalized anxiety disorder is, again, the kind of blanket disorder for if you have an anxiety problem. And a mental disorder is different than just being depressed or being anxious or quote unquote having anxiety. The disorder aspect comes from the fact that it negatively impacts your life in a significant way. A lot of people can have depressive episodes and things like that, and they won't necessarily be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder or anything like that, simply because it's short term and it's easily treatable with either medication or therapy or other things like that, to the point where it doesn't have a major effect on their life. It's still a very, very difficult thing to go through. I'm not attempting to downplay anyone that struggles with any of these things. But the difference with me is that these disorders prevent me from living a normal life. Then we get into panic disorder. Basically means I have panic attacks. But unlike most people where, if you're unfamiliar, a panic attack is effectively your body's fight or flight response gets triggered. But it gets triggered when you don't actually need it. Fight or flight is an essential part of your physiology, and it saves your life. And that is the entire reason it exists. What it does is when your brain thinks that you're in a life or death situation, it will flood your system with adrenaline, which has a number of side effects, but one of the ones that most people think of is it gives you a huge burst of energy. Adrenaline is effectively pure energy, and it gets everything working at like 150%. It does a few other things that people aren't aware of, like adrenaline bursts, depending on the person, can deaden your ability to feel pain. You're not focusing on it, and it's a very useful thing in a fight, in a near-death experience, to be able to ignore the pain of what's going on long enough to get out of the situation. So with panic disorder is specifically, you have panic attacks, which again, lots of people have panic attacks. The thing that classifies panic disorder is a large portion of your panic attacks have no what's called a trigger. One of the ways that you learn to deal with panic attacks, anyone that has ever had a panic attack, one of the ways you learn to deal with them, and it's emphasized a lot in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is you learn to kind of talk yourself down when you start feeling the panic come before the panic attack starts. And what causes you to get into that panic state are these things called triggers. Triggers are basically things that happen that your body will just overreact to. For some people, it might be a phobia. It might be, you see, like if you have arachnophobia, you see a spider and your body immediately goes into fight or flight. Or it could be a result of some sort of trauma. Maybe, when you were younger, you observed a lot of fighting and violence. And so when people start raising their voices around you, that triggers that response, because in your mind, your brain has decided, oh no, we know where this goes. We know that when people start yelling, then they start hitting, and then we're in danger. And so your brain just goes, well, we're going to just skip waiting for the danger to happen. We're going to put you in fight or flight now, and we'll get you out before the danger even starts. However, you're not in that situation anymore, but your brain has still done that. So the normal way that a lot of people learn to deal with panic attacks without medication is through what's called mindfulness, which is basically, getting very much in touch with your body and understanding what all of these different feelings and things like that are happening, and then kind of talking yourself down from what's called catastrophizing, which is basically you see one bad thing and then you keep jumping to conclusions to the point where you always choose what is the absolute worst version of this. Well, and then what's the worst version of what could happen because of the worst version of this? And it turns into a catastrophe. That's why it's called catastrophizing. So that is generally how most people medication, or or who don't or who kind of supplement their medication with therapy and mindfulness and things like that. That's how most people deal with panic attacks that have them. And it's an incredibly effective method to do that. There are also some medications you can take, basically tranquilizers and things like that, that will literally force your body to calm down. My understanding of panic attacks in general is, at least nowadays, it's generally considered a better option to try therapy and mindfulness than it is to medicate for panic attacks, just because the medication tends to treat the symptoms, whereas the mindfulness and everything treats the actual triggers that hurt it. The thing with panic disorder is, I don't know the exact numbers. The number that I remember is up to about 50% of your panic attacks don't have triggers. They just happen, and they happen instantaneously. And because there are no triggers, mindfulness and CBT and all those the things are designed to help you deal with your triggers. And one of the things that you learn in therapy is to identify your triggers, because even if you can't avoid the things that trigger you, knowing that, okay, I know this particular thing will trigger me, you can prepare yourself, and you can actually prevent a panic attack and prevent anxiety attacks, which are two different things. And it's very effective. When you have panic attacks that have no triggers, all of that mindfulness and things like that go out the door. It's not possible to talk yourself down from a panic attack that has no trigger, because by the time the panic attack hits, it is physiological at that point. The adrenaline is already rushing through your system. All of your senses are dialed up to 11. The only thing you can do at that point is to ride it out. Well, for me personally, I've been in therapy for years, and I'm very, very good at mindfulness. So for the most part, unless there is a trigger that I can't anticipate, I'm actually really good at avoiding panic attacks that have a trigger. My problem comes, the majority of my panic attacks now don't have triggers. I just will be doing something, and then I will instantly be in a situation where I feel like I'm about to die, and my heart is racing and that. And then we have to deal with this thing called conversion disorder. Conversion disorder is another kind of blanket term for a bunch of symptoms that effectively can't be explained. I guess physiologically is the best way to explain it. I guess the easiest way to explain it, I guess it's been like 3 or 4 years now. I started having seizures. Full on what appeared to be grand mal seizures. And if anyone's wondering what that means, there's different kinds of seizures that you can have. However, the ones, if I say I'm having seizures, if you think about what you think a seizure is, you're probably thinking about a grand mal seizure. That's the one where body gets all stiff and you shake, and sometimes you'll wet yourself or you're foam at the mouth, stuff like that. Like that's what a grand mal seizure is. So I started having these seizures a few years ago, and we couldn't figure out why. They tested me for epilepsy. Epilepsy, horrible condition to have, but it's actually really fascinating how they're able to tell when you have an epileptic seizure. First of all, epilepsy, there are triggers. Flashing lights is one of the most well-known ones, but there's other things that can trigger epileptic seizures. And so because they know so many things that cause them, they can actually induce a seizure in a controlled environment, which is really, really important for figuring out what's going on. The other thing that's interesting about epilepsy is when you have an epileptic seizure, it happens the same way in every single person's brain. It's a very recognizable pattern. And so if they have you hooked up to, I can't remember what it's called. It's a machine that scans your brain. And it involves a lot of little diodes that they have to put on your scalp, and it's really uncomfortable. But if you have a seizure while they have that on, they can go, oh, that's epilepsy. And it's very diagnosable. And there's a lot of treatments out there. I actually know, I know at least one person, I think I know a couple people that have epilepsy and are not bothered by their seizures at all because they are medicated correctly. And again, it's one of the more well observed and well studied disorders out there. So I'm having these seizures that aren't epileptic seizures. And they're trying to figure out what it is. Well, we start looking back at my history and we start noticing patterns. Things like when I was in high school, I had like a 2-month stint where I developed a tremor in my right leg and it never stopped shaking for 2 months. Remarkably painful experience because your muscles constantly moving for 2 months is exhausting and painful. I've talked about this many times. I've had a tremor in my arm in my right arm for close to, I think it's been like 8 or 9 years now. I don't know. Time is really hard for me to think about anymore because of meds. And so they start kind of putting all these pieces together, and they looked over my whole history, and they diagnosed me with what are called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. And the only reason I know those words is because the acronym for them that you will never see people write out in scientific papers, you'll never see them write out psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. They will write out PNES, which looks like penis. And that's the only reason I know the words, because I find that hilarious. But so they diagnosed me with psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, and basically what that is your brain has an immense amount of control over the rest of your body, and it can actually cause physiological symptoms that don't have a physiological source. They don't have a physiological cause. It's caused psychologically. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not real. A lot of people confuse. There's two terms that some people use interchangeably, and they're very, very different. Is the difference between a psychogenic disorder or symptom and a psychosomatic. A lot of people are familiar with the term psychosomatic, and it's basically, you are effectively causing your own symptoms. You are so afraid of getting sick to your stomach that you cause yourself to become sick to your stomach. That's a psychosomatic symptom. And again, something that's very, very well studied, and there's a very simple process to deal with psychosomatic symptoms. And that is mindfulness, CBT. You basically have to kind of talk yourself down from making yourself sick. Psychogenic is different in the fact that you're not actually causing it. Your brain is technically causing it, but there's no thought process that your brain is going through to tell you, oh, well, you're getting worried about this, and so I'm going to do this, and then you do this, and then I do this. No, it's just a physical manifestation of a psychological problem. The psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, there's been a bunch of other names that they use them. They used to call them pseudo-seizures. They don't call them that anymore because it implies the idea that they're not real. They're 100% real. They can be very, very damaging to the person, though in very, very different ways. Epileptic seizures, because of how the neurons in your brain are firing, can actually damage your brain just from the seizure. Psychogenic seizures, or the term that's most used now, are dissociative seizures. They don't have the same kind of neuron pattern firing in your brain, so they're not as damaging to your brain as an epileptic seizure, but you're still having a seizure. You're still flailing. Like I had a seizure on Wednesday, and I pulled a bunch of muscles all throughout my neck. And I haven't been able to sleep well since then because I'm in a massive amount of pain. I also did some shit to my back as well. not an enjoyable thing. And so, yes, all of your muscles becoming very rigid and spasming very quickly causes damage. It's just different damage than an epileptic seizure. So, so that's where I got my conversion disorder diagnosis. Is they noticed this pattern of things would happen in my life, and I would be put into incredibly high levels of stress, whether it was due to trauma, whether it was due to abuse. There was a bunch of different things that caused it. But effectively, what happened was I would be put into a place where I couldn't deal with everything that was going on. And so my brain would just create these symptoms effectively to try and get me help. Because I wasn't getting any help, and now they've become permanent. Like the stutter is a symptom of my conversion disorder. I have no physiological symptoms that would cause a stutter. It's entirely psychological. It's why my stutter comes and goes. If you watch me GMing or DMing, you'll notice there'll be some times when I speak without any stutter, and then other times where I'm tripping over my words constantly. Same things happen in these videos. It's because it's psychological. It's caused by my conversion disorder. And I have seen multiple teams of doctors about this. This is not a self-diagnosis thing. I have been on many different medications for it. None of them have worked. Most of them have actually almost killed me. So I actually can't be medicated the normal way because of a thing called serotonin syndrome, which I'm not going to get into here, but suffice it to say, the vast majority of antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, and apparently anti-nausea meds too, will kill me outright, and almost did a number of years ago. And the few other drugs that can help are quote-unquote habit forming, which means they're addictive but not quite as addictive as morphine or heroin. And so I can't take those anymore either because I developed a chemical dependency on them, and that becomes very dangerous. The conversion disorder with everything else, like my PTSD and everything else, has just turned into this cocktail where there will be periods of time that I am completely bedridden, like I mentioned before. There's a lot of time when I'm in immense amounts of pain all the time, and I can't take a lot of different painkillers because, again, they interact with my weird brain chemistry. And I develop what's called tolerances for medication extremely quickly, meaning my body just learns to not use them well. It's a great habit to have if you want to get addicted to something really quickly, because that's how addiction happens. Is you'll take something that is addictive or habit forming, and your body will develop a tolerance where it takes more of the medication to get the same amount of relief. And you eventually get to the point where there isn't a level of medication that is safe that you can take to get the relief that you're looking for. And it creates a feedback loop. And it's an incredibly well-studied phenomenon, but it's horrible, absolutely disgusting to go through. Addiction is not something I would wish on my worst enemy. So anyway, the thing that has been causing me issues is the place that we live. The city is upgrading their sewer system. In order to do that, they also have to upgrade the sewage systems in all the houses connected to it. Because if they just change the sewers and they don't do anything about the houses, and then problems happen. Work like this is thousands, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars if we were to do it ourselves. So when the city sent us a letter, I think like a year and a half ago at this point, saying, hey, we're going to do this, and any work that we do on your house, we will pay for. We couldn't say no. This isn't my house, by the way. I live in my brother's house. He owns it. He is nice enough to let me live with him because I can't live on my own. So we've been dealing with this stuff, and it's finally gotten to the point where, like, because they had to send someone in to do some preliminary work where they basically shoved a camera into our sewage system to see where it empties out and all that stuff. But what they have to do, and what they're going to be doing at the end of the month here, is they have to come in and replace a bunch of pipes, I'm assuming, and dig up our yard and do all this other stuff. What that requires is, normally what happens is they're going to be able to do it in a day, which is amazing. Like, I've been incredibly impressed with the people that we've dealt with. They're going to be able to do it in a day. But for an entire day, we're not allowed to use any water in the house. And normally what people do is they get like a hotel room or something for a day, and they just leave. Well, because of my agoraphobia, I physically can't leave the house. I will have seizures and other very, very bad things. I personally haven't left this house in almost 2 years. And the only reason I left our last house is because we moved. And had I not left it, there would have been issues because my family doesn't own that home anymore. And before that, I think it'd been like 3 or 4 years since I'd left. Leaving the house, again, I haven't done it into the 2 years, but the few times that I've had to, it is an exorbitantly difficult process. It generally involves multiple seizures, depending on how long I'm out, and it takes weeks for me to recover from it, because my body is literally ripping itself apart. Because my panic disorder has just gotten steadily worse, and because I can't be medicated for it, and we've started to come to the limits of what therapy can do for it, I become more and more anxious. And so when I was basically told like a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months at this point, you're going to have to leave the house for a full day. My brain went into overdrive and started messing me up massively. Another thing that my brain has learned to do for my conversion disorder is I effectively get food poisoning. All of the symptoms, fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, everything that you would get from having actual food poisoning, I can get without eating anything. And so my brain would kind of switch between giving me food poisoning and then giving me seizures. And that's what's been happening for the past couple months here, is I've basically either been recovering from a seizure or been having food poisoning for 2 months. And it's technically, the food poisoning thing is technically better than it has been, because when it first started happening, for a year, I just had constant food poisoning, and I lost over 100 pounds because I physically couldn't eat anything. I would just get sick even thinking about food. So yeah, 100 pounds. You guys may have seen the rapid weight loss. If you go back through my videos, you go back like 4-ish years, I'm significantly heavier than I am now, because I lost 100 pounds, and not on purpose. And I've gained some of it back as I've started to control it, but I'm not where I was, and I'm very happy about that. Not happy about why it happened, but anyway, so that's what's been going on. And the closer it got to, first of all, we were just told, hey, you're going to get a phone call, and then within a week of that phone call, you have to be out of the house. So that in and of itself was terrifying me, because we didn't know when the phone call was coming. We didn't know. Again, I physically can't leave my house. And even if I stay in here, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. It has been just literally tearing me apart, and I'm in immense amounts of pain constantly, and I'm having really hard time keeping any food down. It has been an absolute nightmare. We finally get the call, I don't know, this past week. Said, yeah, end of the month, like the 30th or the 29th or something. They're going to come in. It's going to start at 7 a.m. And they'll be in and out in a day. So whether I deal with this or not, this is done at the end of the month, which is technically a good thing. Now, brain is going crazy. We've learned a few new things. They may not actually be doing as much inside our house as they will outside our house, digging up our lawn and digging up the sewage pipes and everything out there. So there's a better than average chance that I'm not going to have to leave. And we've done things like we've picked up a camping toilet. Simply because not being allowed to use the bathroom for 12 to 14 hours is just not something that I personally have ever been able to do. So we've picked up something that we can deal with that stuff, and I can stay in the house. So that's what's been going on. Like I said, it is remarkably complicated and incredibly painful to go through, but it's going to be over in less than a month. I don't know what my recovery period is going to be after it's over. Again, every time something like this happens, it's not just the event. Like, it's not just having a seizure. Again, I had a seizure on Wednesday. It is now, I don't know, it is now late Thursday, almost Friday. And I had the seizure like at 2 a.m. on Wednesday. I am still in an immense amount of pain. I can't really sleep all that well because my neck is all screwed up. My muscles are rock solid all throughout here, and it hurts so bad. And that's from a single seizure. This whole thing, it's going to take me time to recover. But it's going to be over. Like, there's nothing I can do that's going to stop this. It's going to be over at the end of the month. And I've been working with my therapist. After all this is done, we're going to be trying to see if I can't get just a little bit of control over where I can go. Right now, I live, for those who don't know, I'm in a basement. On purpose. Like, I like living in the basement. We have a finished basement, or partially finished. The room that I'm in is totally finished. It's very, very nice. I like it here. We have carpet. As you can see, I've got my bookshelves and I've got my wall. Like, it's a nice basement. But I live in the basement. Going upstairs causes me a lot of anxiety, and going outside is just something I have been physically incapable of doing for over a year and a half now, almost 2 years. This is so going to be working with my therapist to try and get a little bit more control. I'd like to start cooking again, but in order to do that, I have to go upstairs because I don't have a kitchen in the basement. Nor do I think that would be a great idea for me to have a kitchen in the basement. I have a toaster oven and a microwave, so I can feed myself down here, but that's not cooking. And anyone that tells you microwaving things is cooking, no. Learn to cook. It's not that hard, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So yeah, I'm going to be working with my therapist to try and get a little bit more control over my life, to increase my quality of life as much as is possible. But I've had to lower my expectations for what my life is going to be over and over and over again since I got my diagnosis. Since I was, years ago, I was technically voluntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. And when I say technically, I mean I was told either I can voluntarily commit myself or they were going to call the police and they were going to have me forcefully committed. And the big difference between voluntary commitment and forced commitment, at least in the U.S., is if you voluntarily commit yourself to a psychiatric ward, you can also voluntarily leave. Unless they consider you a danger to yourself or to someone else, you're allowed to leave when you want. If you are forcefully committed, you don't leave until they tell you you can leave. And that terrified me. So I was committed to a psychiatric ward. While I was there, I told the psychiatrist on staff, they asked me why I wasn't taking a medication for it. I told them medication doesn't really work the way it's supposed to on me. I generally only get the bad side effects and I don't get any relief. The psychiatrist, whom I do not believe should be practicing medicine in any way, shape, or form, basically told me, because at that point I was also applying for disability because I couldn't keep a job. And they basically told me that if I didn't take meds, I would never be able to be put on disability, and everyone would think I was lying. And that's actually one of my triggers for my PTSD, due to the initial trauma that caused my PTSD, which I'm not going to talk about here, but something that no child should ever have to deal with. Let's put it that way. So when I become extremely depressed, I become very compliant. I do what I'm told when I'm told to do it. And because I was in an incredibly depressed state, I didn't fight for myself. They put me on medication, and had I continued on the plan that the psychiatrist had given me, I would be dead. I developed full-blown serotonin syndrome, which is basically you get too much serotonin in your brain, and there's a bunch of different symptoms for it. The symptoms I got is I had full-body convulsions, constant, not like I had a seizure where I would seize or no. For a month and a half, my entire body was constantly convulsing. I could barely look where I wanted to because I was shaking so badly. I had a fever of like 103 or 104. That's generally what kills you with serotonin syndrome, is your temperature gets so high that it boils your brain. And my doctor flat out told me, he's like, yeah, if you continue, you'd be dead right now. So, yeah. I have trust issues now with psychiatrists. Funny part is, after dealing with that psychiatrist, they put me on different meds, and because my main doctor is just a GP, general practitioner, for family medicine, he assigned me a psychiatrist. Because for those of you that don't know, a psychiatrist, their specialty is drugs. Like, that's what they do. A lot of people use the term like psychiatrists and therapists interchangeably. It's not. Psychiatrists are specially trained to monitor drugs, specifically for psychiatric care, but they are drug doctors, and they're very, very good at what they do. Other than this one moron that I don't think should be practicing medicine. The psychiatrist that I had was wonderful and was amazing. Unfortunately, put me on some medication that I really shouldn't have been on for as long as I was, caused some permanent brain damage. But it is what it is. I was put on it to deal with the convulsions, because had I not been put on, they put me on Valium, benzodiazepine. So had they not put me on that, I probably would have caused permanent damage to my body from the convulsions. That would at least sedate me and would make them less bad. If you look at the videos from that period of my life, which I don't remember what it was, but I was still making videos. It was in December when I did it, so I still had Daily December that I did that year. I believe almost all of them were recorded while I was on the Valium, because I simply couldn't do it when I wasn't. And that's where my stutter first started coming, because my body was shaking all at the time, and my brain just went, oh, let's keep the stutter. So anyway, I'm going to take a drink. That's what's been going on. I'm just sick. That's all it is. I'm not forgetting about the channel. I'm not taking a break or anything. I've just physically been unable to get to my computer Literally, my bed is right on the other side. Well, not right on the other side. It's like 10 feet that way. So one of the reasons I chose this room is so that I could have this nice. It's basically a little nook. So I have this nook for my computer where I could put up my shelves and I could have a really nice backdrop for the computer, and then the rest of my bedroom is over there. But I've been in so much pain and so many bad things have been happening that I have been physically incapable of going from there to here for days at a time. And the few times that I was able to go to my computer, the other thing that's been taking up a lot of my time, on Saturday, the first episode of my new campaign for Zelda Universe starts. And so I've been doing a lot of behind the scenes work for that, designing or modifying the Cypher system to work for the game we want to run, creating the characters with the various players, creating the world, creating the first bits of plot and lore for us to play in. I've been doing all that with the few bits of time that I've been able to get up. And then I was still running my other two D&D games whenever I could. I took the last 2 weeks off from running my D&D games, just so I could just focus on getting the new campaigns called Tears of the Realms, just so I could finish getting that done. And once that started and going, the way that I prep for a new campaign is I really heavy load my prep before, and I kind of create the world around the game. And then when the game is actually playing, I already know how the world works, and so I can just kind of react to what the players do. And it gives the players a ton of freedom because they can go wherever they want and do whatever they want. And it means that my prep work becomes significantly less for months after I start a new campaign, because I've done all the heavy lifting. And then when I do have large amounts of prep work, like if I have to build a dungeon or something like that, I do those in small bursts, and then I can just react and run the games and let the players play the way they want. So that's what's been going on. I actually partially recorded the next Designing New Dragons and got interrupted, and I just haven't been able to go back and do it. And but I still plan on doing 2 more Transformers, hopefully Monday, Wednesday next week. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's the goal. And then after that, we're going to do G.I. Joe. And then after that, we're going to do the crossovers. And then I'm going to do something that's probably not Essence 20 related, just to kind of cleanse the palate for a little bit. But that's what I plan to do. I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to upload, and the uploads have been really sporadic. I am literally fighting my own body to exist. So that's all that's going on. I hope this hasn't upset too many people that you guys came here for content and you're just not getting it. And I understand that for frustration. And I'm doing everything I can to just get back on task. I can't muscle through this. I can't just kind of, grin and bear it through this. If I fight my brain on this too much, significantly worse things happen. And I don't want to get to that point, because eventually I can get to the point where I have to be hospitalized, and I never want to go through that again. Despite the fact that other than that psychiatrist, everyone at the psychiatric hospital were the most wonderful, amazing people I've ever interacted with. Everyone except that psychiatrist. Even the damn vampire that came in every day to draw my blood. Because I kid you not, every day, 2 or 3 times a day. I was only there for, I think, 3 days. Every day I would get blood drawn. And it was the same, they had their own phlebotomist. If you don't know what a phlebotomist is, they are, I believe, a nurse that specializes in drawing blood, which is a godsend, because my veins suck. And so it's always a pain in the ass to get and I'm also terrified of needles. I had to stop getting blood draws done at my local clinic because I would have seizures every time I would have a blood draw because I'm so terrified of needles. And so they would actually send me to an actual hospital to get blood draws done because they have phlebotomists there. And if I have a seizure and something goes wrong, they have all the facilities there to make sure I don't die, instead of my clinic basically having like ice packs and, you know, a little bit of medication. So yeah, but even the phlebotomists, they were all wonderful, amazing, lovely people. Despite that, it was the most terrifying, horrible experience of my life. Being locked on a floor, like we had a whole floor, and I had my own room, which was a huge, huge thing for me because social anxiety disorder, sharing a room causes massive problems. So I had my own room, which was really nice, with my own shower and everything, which was really nice. But just being locked on that floor and knowing that it didn't matter what I did, I wasn't allowed to go, I wasn't allowed to leave, I wasn't allowed to go home where I feel safe, was horrible. And the one person that made it livable, there was, I don't know what to call them. It was a doctor, but they weren't a doctor yet. And they were doing their psychiatric rotation in here. And for the life of me, I'm bad with names in general. And this happened at a very, very bad point in my life. So I don't know what the dude's name is. But if you ever see this, doctor whatever, you were the person that got me through. And it was only 3 days. So a lot of you are like, it's 3 days is nothing. 3 days that changed my life. I would not have made it through that without that doctor, because he would do things like, I can remember distinctly, I would assume he saw that I was just having a really, really bad time. And so he just came and he talked to me, and we paced around the psych ward that I was in, which the specific psych ward that I was in was for mental patients and addiction patients. So we had people dealing with alcoholism and addiction to various drugs, and then we also had psychiatric patients, which could be everything from people like me, who I was there because they were worried I was going to commit suicide, to schizophrenics and other people with varying varying degrees of mental illness that required hospitalization. And so we just walked up and down. I can't even remember what we talked about, to be perfectly honest, but we just talked. And it made me feel normal for a little bit. And I can't tell you how long it happened. I don't know if we talked for 5 minutes or for an hour. But it made it livable. So, doctor, if you're out there, I hope what you experienced in there changed your life like it changed mine. Because I think a lot of people don't understand exactly what it's like to have a mental illness, and just how abused and mistreated the mentally ill are in this country. And how a lot of people don't understand that it's not us looking for attention. It's not, we're not weak. We're not, just not trying hard enough. And I hope that wherever he is practicing, that he's doing well, because he absolutely saved my life. But anyway, that's it. That's what's going on with the channel. Like I said, goal is by next week to have something. Don't know what, but I already know the build I'm doing for my next Designing New Dragons. It's going to be awesome. And then going forward again, it's basically just going to be me trying to get back to what I was doing before. Don't know how long it's going to take. If you guys stay throughout this, I promise it'll be worth it. It's just been rough. And again, I apologize for not kind of keeping you guys informed and up to date on all the stuff. It just felt like I just disappeared and ghosted you all. It's never my intention. I've been real sick. So anyway, it's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right. Bye-bye.